We finished defining the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. Our objective in this chapter is to understand the role of government and how government intervention affects the idea of efficiency in our market. So we first developed two concepts of efficiency: consumer surplus and producer surplus. Consumer surplus really is the net benefit to the consumer if the market is in equilibrium, and producer surplus is the net benefit to the producer if the market is in equilibrium. We sort of provided some insight as to how to calculate this consumer surplus. So consumer surplus, as we have shown, is the area below the market demand curve and above the market price, the large triangle. And the producer surplus is the area below the market price and above the supply curve, which we just looked at in a minute. So that's my producer surplus. So today we will sort of move a little bit further, and we are going to use these concepts of producer surplus and consumer surplus to learn a little bit more about the idea of efficiency in our market. We have looked at the issue of efficiency before. We looked at efficiency from an allocative efficiency perspective and from a productive efficiency perspective. Just to remind ourselves, in chapter 2, we looked at efficiency, which is was a discussion about how the society utilizes its resources. We are very much sensitive about this question because our resources are limited, so that we want to find the best possible utilization of our resources. Hence, we always want to ensure that we have efficiency. Now, this broader measurement of efficiency sometimes gets lost when we focus on more microeconomic issues such as market. Today, we are going to fill up that gap by talking about how efficient our market model is from the perspective of economic efficiency. But in order to do that, we will modify our concept of efficiency a little bit by making it more operational. And we're going to say that our economic efficiency is just measured through the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus. So what we're going to do, we're going to say that whether our economy is efficient or not can be quantitatively measured through the measurement of consumer surplus and producer surplus. We're going to say in a minute that if our economy can derive us the maximum sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus, our economy is efficient. Otherwise, our economy is not efficient. So the entire discussion about efficiency from now on in the next couple of chapters, including this one, will be based on our notion of consumer surplus and a producer surplus. So these two concepts are very important. So as a sort of exercise, did we cover any of these questions in the last class? Let's go over them, just to make it as a sort of like a review of our consumer surplus and producer surplus. So this one, what do you think? What's the answer? So the answer is actually B, because our consumer surplus measures the net benefit. This is just definitional. It is not that critical. I'm going to skip the definition of marginal cost because definitions are boring. And I want to focus on this one. So we have market price of $2. And when you are producing 40 cups of output, how much producer surplus do you obtain? I think we did this one, right? Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we know what our price is and we know what our market quantity is. So how do you calculate a producer surplus? So we know that producer surplus is the difference between the price that our producer is willing to accept and the price that he actually gets. Producer surplus is the difference between the market price and the minimum price that our producer is willing to accept. So when we look at the output level 40, we know that the minimum price that our producer is willing to accept is $1.80. Do you all see that? And the price that our producer gets is $2. So the producer surplus is $2 minus $1.80, and that's 20 cents. Right? Makes sense? So the answer is C. Suppose we are given this point. Let's just to make it a little bit easier. Let's say that point is 80. Okay? I know the vertical intercept of my supply curve, and you are asked to calculate producer surplus at 40, the quantity. Can we do this? So you are being told that the market equilibrium is 40 units of quantity, and we want to find out what the producer surplus is. So we know that at that level, producer surplus is base half times base times height. That's the area of the triangle, this triangle, which is our producer surplus. So we can find the base. Base is 40. Do we all see that? Base is starting from that to this, so that is 40. Because this is a rectangle, that size is equal to that. And height is basically this, which is just 1, right? So our producer surplus is 20. So we can use the concept of producer surplus and consumer surplus and a little bit of trick from geometry to really calculate, to have a numerical or quantitative measurement of consumer surplus and producer surplus. You guys look very gloomy today. What happened? You guys are worried about your grade?
You go over the horizontal.
Okay, so the area of a triangle is half times base times height, right? So the producer surplus is the area below the market price and above the supply curve. So that's our producer surplus. The area of that producer surplus is nothing but half times height times base. So our base is this one, right? Because this and this is a rectangle. So that's 40, and the height is just this. The height of the rectangle is that, which is 1.8 minus 8, so just 1. So you can calculate the area. Did we not show how to calculate consumer surplus by using the area? I apologize, and I have apologized many times before. The reason why sometimes I get confused is because I teach 2 back-to-back classes, and there is a mismatch. Can anyone remind me where we stopped last time? Did we talk about consumer surplus and showed how consumer surplus is calculated as the area above the market equilibrium price and below the demand curve? So did we talk about producer surplus? Then I have shown you how to calculate that. Anyway, so where did we stop? Anyone? Did we stop here? Let's go over it again. So our discussion will start with the fact that a supply curve can be interpreted as marginal cost curve. So what is marginal cost? Marginal cost is the cost of producing each additional unit of output. Now, when we look at a supply curve, we say our supply curve is upward sloping like S, which tells us that at a given price, the amount of output the firms are willing to sell is Q1 when the price is P1. We can make this statement in a completely different way. We can say, and please hear the statement, that at a given quantity of Q1, if the firm is selling Q1, the minimum price our firm will be willing to accept is P1. Can I make that statement just by looking at my supply curve? Let me repeat that statement again. So our supply curve shows us the relationship between price and quantity supplied for a producer. So it shows us at a given price how much output our producer is willing to supply. So if price is P1, the amount that producer is willing to sell is Q1. Now we can sort of invert this statement by saying that if our producer wants to sell Q1, the minimum price our producer will be willing to accept is Q1. Why? Because if he does not get the minimum price P1, it really does not cover his cost of production. And we know that if price doesn't cover the cost, our producer earns loss and he's not going to sell. So we can argue that P1 is the minimum price that our producer will be willing to accept if our producer wants to produce and supply Q1 units of output in the market. If this is, so does this statement make sense? If the statement makes sense, we can therefore say that our supply curve is also the marginal cost curve for our firm. Meaning that the supply curve gives us the same information as what is the cost of production for a firm when they are producing different levels of output. With this interpretation, we are now going to look at how the producer surplus is calculated. Producer surplus, by definition, is the gap between the minimum price our producer is willing to accept and the price our producer actually gets. Imagine that our producer here is trying to supply tea, Heavenly Tea, a brand, and we are going to trace down how the producer surplus is being calculated for this producer. Imagine that the market price was $1.25. According to the supply curve of the producer, when the market price is $1.25, the output that our producer is going to sell is 1. Notice that when our producer is selling 1 unit and the market price is $1.25, there is no producer surplus because the price that our producer gets is also the price that the market offers him, right? So $1.25 is the minimum price our producer was willing to accept, and that is also the price our producer actually gets. Are we all clear on the fact that when the output being supplied in the market is 1, our producer earns no producer surplus? If you have any question, please ask me. Things become interesting when the price rises to $1.50. At $1 price of $1.50, notice 2 things are happening. First of all, our firm is now producing and supplying 2 units of output in the market. Do we all see that? At price of $1.50, our producer is now producing 2 units and supplying 2 units in the market. But from our previous discussion, we knew that it cost our producer to $1.25 to produce the first unit of output. And our producer gets $1.25. So it means that for the first unit, our producer earns a producer surplus of 0.25 cents, which is the producer surplus of the first unit. Do we all see that? As the prices go up, by the way, the producer surplus for the second unit is 0, because for the producer, it takes him $1.50 to produce the second good, and he also gets that price. When the price rises to $1.75, notice that the producer surplus from producing the first unit is this big rectangle, and the producer surplus from producing the second unit is this small rectangle. As prices go up, we continue to accumulate more and more rectangular areas that keeps track of how much producer surplus each unit of output is accumulating for our producer. In summary, The producer surplus is going to be the sum of the area below the margin